There's lots of volatility on the markets. Leads one to ask, do fundamentals or emotions drive the market?
Not really. It's the realities in the economy. In fact, for us in the South, it's quite exciting because usually the emerging market in the South generally has been the one hit hard by various crises and volatilities. So to see one of the biggest economies, the Eurozone, having volatility is quite nice because it's been very painful for the South, particularly for the ordinary person. So to see the Europeans on the other side, it's quite nice. But more challenging is the fact that a lot of the economies in the South, including South Africa, are exporters to the European zone. So it's very worrying in terms of maintaining jobs and competitiveness in the global economy, given the impact of this crisis in the North.
That's what I was going to ask you. What impact will it have on South Africa going forward?
Well, going forward, firstly, about 32% of trade is done with Eurozone, particularly with England and Germany being the biggest consumers of our exports. So it's very challenging for us. We're going to have to look more on the East and strengthening the India as well as the Brazilian relationships, including Chile and Argentina, because for us to sustain our jobs in the export sector, we will have to create new markets. But going forward also, I'm very excited that the rand is starting weakening because our exports are dollar-based. So against the dollar, the rand is weakening. We've been arguing in the show for quite a long time that we're not happy with the rand being so strong. So going forward for exporters, it's new markets. The rand is now trading, it's going towards competitiveness, and hopefully as our economy is growing and the consumer slowly coming back to shop, we may see some stronger recovery in the domestic South African economy.
It was trading at about 772 yesterday, the rand.
Yes, but we'd like to see it around 850. That's our target on the export side. But more importantly also, we want to make sure that the Chinese and the Indians continue consuming some of the African commodities, whether it's copper, it's platinum, or other ferrometals that are produced in the continent.
I guess all the uncertainty in the Eurozone is whether the European Union will actually follow through with all these austerity measures that are in place.
Well, we know that the biggest backers of the Eurozone are Germany and France. So now we're having a redistribution of wealth from those two countries to the rest of Europe, particularly Greece, Spain, Portugal. So the challenge is whether the politicians in Spain, Portugal, as well as Greece can be able to sustain the political pressure coming from the poor, because people are saying perhaps the Euro zone has benefited the elite, and therefore maybe delinking from the Euro may help prop us up. It's really a political argument. The reality is that economically, integration does redistribute, does help those that are marginalized, including those economies. So politically, as a sentiment, it may be appealing. So we may see those governments being voted out and these countries being tempted to move the Euro, which is a political symbol, because economically, they are all linked.
Greece yesterday considering to move out of the Eurozone. Still a rumor at this stage. What impact will it have going forward?
Well, the reality is that it's going to have a huge impact in terms of them, because if they bring back another currency, like the drachma, they're in a Eurozone, so they have to trade in a common currency. So it's really more psychological and political sentiment. The reality is that the Greeks are going to become poorer, and going forward, they have to do take all the austerity measures, as we have done them in many of the emerging markets in terms of IMF recommendation. But going forward, it's going to be very, very hard for them. So they have to take the pain and swallow the pill.
If we come back to South Africa, we saw retail sales up 1% year-on-year in March. A big surprise, but on a quarter-on-quarter basis, the first quarter was down 0.6%. Is it still too early to say that the household sector is coming out of a recession? It's
too early, Mashudu. We know that we may see it continuing as well, looking good, at least in the next 2 months, because people are very happy. You see, South Africans have got all the flags. They're very positive because of the World Cup coming in the next 2.5 weeks. So therefore, we see retail sales continuing, but in the medium term, they're going to come down very sharply. Household debt is still very high. Despite the lower interest rate and the low debt service cost, consumers are still stretched out there. You've seen the retail results of most of the banks aren't looking good at all. So this is just a sign, but I don't think that it's a rebound, a serious rebound to drive us going forward.
Another sector of the economy, the construction sector, building plans passed, they edged up to 1.3% year-on-year in March. But if we look at the first quarter, down 6%. What is your outlook for the construction sector going forward?
Very negative, very negative. Unless, of course, we see the volatility continuing in Europe for quite a long time, and also a lot of the growth coming from African economies, not so much in the south, because we know that countries like Zambia, as well as Zimbabwe, if they rebound, they'll need a lot of infrastructure investment. But South Africa, I don't think that you can sustain the long-term investment in infrastructure, because the government is becoming more and more poorer, unless and also with the European market, with higher debt demand, we may see ourselves being squeezed out, and therefore South Africa is unlikely to see a growth in the infrastructure, given the fact that there will be no money available domestically as well as internationally, and therefore pressure on the construction sector for quite a while.
The IMF looking to edge up the GDP forecast for South Africa to 3%. Are you of that view as well? I'm
of that view, but it's also not sustainable based on what we've discussed around the construction sector, high level cost, high debt service cost, as well as high debt levels by consumers. And therefore, I don't think that you can sustain that. However, with the commodity rebounding, we see the mining production coming up as well.
Manufacturing as well.
Yes, but I'm still quite worried about our second biggest trading part of the Eurozone, given what we're seeing at the moment.